what's sustainability?
That's a very big question, and I think when sustainability as a word started becoming fashionable, at that point, I think it was very real. Sustainability to me always means the gifts that nature gives us for life to sustain itself. How can we look after them and nurture them for future generations? And not just nurture them for future generations and look after them at a horizontal level, but also that it is a quality of life. The life that you get using those gifts, appreciating those gifts, is qualitative, not just for the population to increase, but that increase in population to live a quality of life that is beyond just survival. So, sustainability today, after many years of using that word, and as we've seen the growth of capitalism and the growth of multinational corporations and the growth of the think culture, there's so much that is just eyewash of sustainability. What are we really doing? How are we maintaining the balance and using wisely those gifts that nature gives us? Gifts that, such as water, gifts such as the air that we breathe, gifts such as the ability for nature to produce, help us produce good organic food which keeps us healthy. That's sustainability to me. If you look at when our grandfather, for example, I'm in my 50s, and if I look at the life my grandparents led, or even my parents and my childhood, there was no conversation about sustainability. It was there. It was present. It was visible. It was in the food my parents were able to provide for us. It was in the water we drank. We could drink straight from the rivers. The rivers were not polluted. It was a quality of life, and sustaining and maintaining the quality of life that nature's gifts gave us was very evident at that time. Today, look at the fragmentation we see around us. Today, we see that the focus seems to have shifted from human beings and nature to a think culture, to corporations, to companies, to the bottom line, to profits. And in that chase, even though the people who work in these corporations, etc., all understand the word sustainability, something seems to have been split from understanding nature and sustainability and maintaining and sustaining the ability of nature to give us her gifts, to using nature's gifts for private purpose and private profit. And that seems to have become like a runaway train. There is no understanding of focus, that if we are perpetually running on that train and the train's running away of profit, we leave something behind. What have we left behind? So we leave behind a vast swathe of humanity and nature which isn't able to sustain itself. So we have to look at the word sustainability. In fact, today I feel the degrees have gone up. We aren't just talking about sustainability. Sustainability is almost like a horizontal concept. We are talking the actions we need to take have to go beyond sustainability. Where we go beyond sustaining, we also do repair, we also rejuvenate, we also resuscitate, we also revive, so that it can then reach that level of being able to sustain by itself. So I work in water, and I work with communities across the world. Communities in India, communities in Europe, in the UK. We've been talking to communities here in Colombia, various places where communities who are facing a lot of trouble around water, whether it's droughts or it's floods. Can these communities bring back that conversation they have with nature, with their landscape, and make their landscapes healthy again? Can they make landscapes such that it'll be able to sustain not just their lives of their generation, but also of the future generations? So if I go back to the kind of sustainability that existed when I was a child, when my parents were helping us grow up, that level of sustainability is what we don't have today. So just to get to that, we need to do extra steps. So to me, sustainability and beyond is the way to go. Okay, As I mentioned, I work with communities and water, and we had an interesting conversation recently about dams, because a lot of the interventions that my communities build are small earthen check dams in the landscape which hold the water. So the principle is slow, store, and filter. Slow the water, filter it, and allow it to regenerate the landscape. In the case of droughts, it goes into the ground, it recharges a dry aquifer, and then the extra becomes a spillway and a river, and it recharges the wells downstream. In the case of a flood, the same principle, the same check dam will allow the water to be held in one place and not become this volume that goes and floods downstream. Now, that's the conversation we were having about small dams, and then the conversation shifted to big dams. And big dams, in my understanding, as we worked with them, do nothing but cause huge amounts of havoc for people, for nature, for everybody. And almost, it's almost telling, and it's a question, it's something to think about, that the Western world actually stopped building big dams almost in the 1960s and 70s. So why are we looking at building big dams in the developing parts of the world? So that brings a holistic understanding of, it's actually, you build a big dam somewhere, the effect of it is felt somewhere else. Can we look at sustainability as something for the whole world, where communities that may be literate or illiterate, where scientists who understand various theories and know various statistics around the whole system that is the earth, and all the rest of humanity can work together? So that was the thing that was in my mind when I was working with looking at landscapes in India, where there was, we work in the state of Rajasthan, which is a desert state, and our partner over there has revived 7 rivers. Now, how has he done that? He went into this very dry area where the people were eking out a really miserable existence, and working with the community, they built these, over a period of a few years, they built these little interventions, held the water, and rivers which had been dry for 60, 70 years came back to life. With the coming back to life of the river, the life of the community came back. And to me, that is sustainability. That is exciting sustainability, where you have communities on the ground who had given up hope, who were at the mercy of systems which had put them in that place, and living in landscapes which weren't giving them a quality of life which every human being and every being in nature deserves. They weren't getting that. And then they put in that effort. Each household put in some effort to revive the river, which then brings back to life their entire region. So not just their families and communities came to life, their whole nature came back to life. To me, that's the work that I enjoy the most, where it's not, sustainability isn't a concept that's being talked by an elite group of people saying we need to do this. Sustainability then becomes a very real experience. It becomes a practice, it becomes an action for communities to do something instead of feeling overwhelmed with this degradation they see around them. Instead, they're doing something active and rejuvenating their lives. So their lives become they sustainable, and in continuing to look after them, they are actually doing the 3 and 4 degrees above sustainable, which will then bring it back to a balance, a balance which then will be in service of their future generations.
Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share regarding how people, for instance, young people in urban areas, how can they participate somehow in this more sustainable way of living that somehow we're talking about? How does people that are perhaps not into creating concrete or direct transformation processes, how can everybody in their own daily lives, how can they contribute to this shift?
Okay, I want to pick up on the word you used earlier, urban, and then we look at the words young people, and we look at how people can contribute. To me, it's a question of responsibility. So whether we live in an urban area or a rural area, if we are alive, that means nature's gifts are being consumed, used by us to keep us healthy and alive, whether we live in a town or we live in an urban. rural area. So there is no urban resilience without rural resilience. So if we make the rural areas resilient, then urban areas get the food that they need. So then comes the question, but cities are becoming the way to go, and they're becoming more and more full of people, and how do these people, what can they do in their daily lives? Now, in our, of course, there are various strata of people. There are people who are just eking out a living. There are people who are in the middle section, and then there are very, very wealthy people. But the word responsibility lies actually on all of us. It's not that X people have more responsibility than others. We all have a responsibility to do our bit towards sustainability, towards keeping the planet sustainable for future generations. So how can people who are busy running around in their daily lives look after that word? So for me, the first one word is awareness. Whatever choice we make in terms of buying our clothes, in terms of buying our food, in terms of any gadget, whatever we buy, if we do it with awareness and understand what has gone into the making of that particular thing that we are buying and using and enjoying, then there is the word responsibility comes in, because then we know how it's been made, where it's been made, has it been made not exploiting somebody? Has it been children who are behind it? Is it fair trade? Did the people who make it and supply the various materials for it, have they been paid fairly? So the choice then becomes ours. We may still buy that product if nothing else is available, but when awareness comes in, then our choices become much, much more responsible and more meaningful, and contribute towards the word sustainability. In each successive decision we make, or step we take, or an action we take, then becomes a little more mindful of sustainability and a little less exploitative. That's one. So that is directly in our hands. It's in our purchasing power. We can say no to goods that aren't produced sustainably. No? That is in our hands. You take a simple thing like a loaf of bread. You can buy a loaf of bread which is produced in a factory with tons of chemicals, which is grown from wheat, which has been, you don't know where it's come from, has the farmer been paid fairly or not. But now, what's exciting is that this conversation of sustainability has got lots of people wanting to be fair. As a rule, people want to be contributing to nature, to their communities. And these very same people are actively starting maybe a bakery that is built on these sustainable principles and on a sustainable foundation. So actively look for those kind of places where you can exercise your purchasing power sustainably for your daily needs. If I want to link that back to water, to the work in water that we do, it is very relevant to cities as well. Often in cities, there are two things in cities which definitely happen. One is that cities are concreted over, all the water goes into the drain and then it's taken out. And that is really bad, for the water cycle, for the city, and for us. So that means we are taking water from rural areas and bringing it as a one-way street into the city, and then it goes down to the sea. Rather, we should actively ask for more green spaces where the water can actually soak down into the ground. If you look at big cities, in earlier times, they had many parks. There were, in those days, the people who were in the local councils, who were governing, they understood the relationship between having spaces to dwell as well as having green spaces for those who live in cities, to have fresh air to breathe, to have natural spaces for their souls to feel joyous, to go with their children, to understand how nature works, and that connection between, keeping that connection between nature and ourselves alive. So we can demand from our local councils more green spaces if we don't have them. And it's easy enough to say, yeah, but they don't listen, or but I don't have the time. But then come back to responsibility. If you don't get those, then you haven't actively asked for them. Government is there to serve us. And if we as a community rise up together and ask for something, then it is their job to listen. And I have a fairly good experience with government in that it's not always possible, but they do listen. They are there to serve us. So that could be one. And the other is, of course, in our daily lives. Don't waste water. Don't waste food. These are actions, all actions towards sustainability. Don't buy more food than you can consume and then throw the rest away. We're contributing to so much waste. Don't buy more things than you need. These are all actions of sustainability that urban people can do and take in their daily lives, and they don't require that much effort. It's just being aware and responsible and mindful of our role in keeping the planet sustainable and healthy for future generations. Okay. One of the issues that we talk about when in the work in water that we do is what is the connection between communities and government? Is that a healthy connection? Does government really do what you want with government to do, or do communities just sit back and say government will do it and then don't do anything? Those are questions we play around with a lot, especially in areas where everything seems to have broken down, including the systems of nature. And I'll give you an example from Rajasthan, where we were, where our partner had revived the very first river. There was a very small river, about 40 miles, and with about 70 villages along the course of that river. And I mean, I say river, it wasn't a river when our partner went there. And it had been dead for about 60 or 70 years. There was not a drop of water in it. In fact, it looked like a road. And in those 70 odd villages, whoever was young and able to work had to leave farming and go to the cities to find some work so they could send some money back. And the people who were left behind, they were the ones who were forgotten even by government. You know, the government had said, sorry, there is nothing we can do for you here, you'll have to manage yourself. So you can imagine over a period of time how apathetic people become. There is nothing, you're just eking an existence out. That, of course, is a complete breakdown of sustainability. In such a scenario, when they remembered, in conversation with the person from outside who came, our partner Rajendra, help them think that there was something that they used to do in the past. There was a traditional wisdom in the area that used to help them keep the water which used to fall from the sky. The water in India comes during the monsoon months, which is 4 months in a year, and that's got to really be kept, because then the rest of the year, that is what you use. So when the villagers remembered that, when they remembered that, oh, we used to do something in the past, and with the help of others in the community, everybody contributed something to get those interventions back up, repaired, and when the first rains came, the water filled up and didn't go away immediately. The excitement that came, yes, there was something we did, and in that something that we did, we have a little bit more water this year. And over a period of time, the river became alive. The river started flowing. When it flowed, the first year it flowed for 3 extra months. In the 4 years, it flowed for about 8 months. In 12 years, the river flowed perennially. So from a dead river where there wasn't a drop of water, these people working with themselves, the ones who government had forgotten, these people actually revived the river, which brought back their life. So that was self-help. That is something we all can do. And then if government says, no, we can't look after, the government says, sorry, that's, your work. If you do it, don't do it, it's not our problem. And then after you do something good and government says, okay, now we've got laws and we've got legal, we've got this, we've got that. Something similar happened with the same community. The government comes in and says, look, you've got a river, you've got fish in the river, so you have to take a license from us. And the consternation that was there in the people, that when we needed the government, where was the government? And now that we have something, why is the government coming in? At that point, there was something that rose in the people of that community, and they said, we can't, this is outrageous. They can't do this. The government is here to work with us, not against us all the time. And so that conversation that they had with the government at that time, and they said, no, it's not about laws and licenses that you're giving. The river is ours. We revived the river. So let us work together to see how we can keep this river flowing and in benefit to the community that has revived it. And over a period of time, the government had to completely agree to what the community was saying. But in that, I found something very interesting in their responding to the government and saying no to them. in that response, in the coming together to formulate that response, the community also came together in the understanding of governance. So it's not just enough to revive the river. What's going to happen to the next generation who hasn't played a part in reviving? They'll go back potentially to the same state that they were in. So this community then understood that they have to look after their river. If they want this revival, this rejuvenation, the river to flow continuously, they have to frame certain rules and regulations with which this river will continue to flow again. So that understanding of what the government does, what role governance plays, whether it's self-governance or governance in collaboration with elected government, that's a crucial understanding citizens must have. And when we have that, then we really take a step towards sustainability. The sentence "small is beautiful" has such a deep truth in it, and which is true for almost everything in life that we see, we work with, we engage with, and to have a quality of life. In our work with water, I mentioned earlier big dams. What do big dams do? Who do they benefit? Big dams are touted as a green alternative for hydropower, but actually to build a big dam, you need huge amounts of money, which usually benefit the bank that is lending them. If there's corruption in the governments that they lend it to, then it benefits all the corrupt government officials. They flood vast areas. Villages are displaced who are actually were leading a very harmonious existence with nature. If they're farmers, they no longer have their farmlands to farm. They are gathered together and dumped onto certain other parts of land which the government may think, let's put them there. They no longer have land to farm. They are in an environment which they don't recognize. They then have to take up jobs to survive so that they can live a life, and they don't have skills for those jobs, and often not having those jobs or not understanding how to do those jobs, and being completely displaced. There's a lot of crime comes in those areas. Nobody benefits with those big dams, and not to mention, this is human being, not to mention the cost to nature. Okay, when it gets flooded, it's been proven when there are very high volumes of water over areas of land where there shouldn't be such a high volume of water, earthquakes can occur, landslides can occur. So who do big dams benefit? Okay, there's a little amount of energy that comes out which then powers our homes. But look at the sunshine, look at the wind. We have plenty of that. And those are far more sustainable and ways of getting renewable energy than actually stopping the flow of a river. So that's on one side. And then so that's big. And to me, that's absolutely unsustainable. And then you have small is beautiful, where I've given you the example of the communities 70 villages, each village with X number of households, working together to build interventions in the landscape, and then you have your little river revives, and you have water forever, and then they come together to look after their river for future generations. There's no interference, no displacement. In fact, what actually happened in those cases, the young man came back from the village, from the cities. They came back to their villages, they took up farming again, and the community got enriched and alive. It became a community again. So on the one hand, with big, you have displacement of communities and complete breakdown in life support and life systems for the people who are at the mercy of those big dams. And on the other hand, you have small is beautiful, where communities which weren't alive are now flourishing and alive again. It's a very simple equation. Small is always definitely much more beautiful. I can say one more thing. In small is beautiful, this is in the physical aspect, but big is certainly better in some respects. And in which areas? We need a big heart, we need big spirit, we need a big vision to be able to understand concepts like sustainability, to be able to put them in place, not just for our generation, but for future generations. So as big is good in some places, but in most spaces, it is small that is beautiful.
Thank you very much, Minni.
Thank you. Good? I'm free?
Good,
I can
yes.
go?
You're free. Yes, you're free.
Thank you very much.